welcome Dennis Woloch. Dennis was the art director for KISS from 1975 to the early 90s. We're going to talk about KISS. We're going to talk about being a designer and art director in a pre-digital world and working in New York City.
I worked for KISS for about the time period that you mentioned, but I was the art director and creative director at an ad agency in New York City, right there on Madison Avenue, just like you see in the movies. And KISS became one of our clients. That's our building right there. That's my boss, Howard Mark. I worked there for at least 5 years, 5.5 years before KISS became our client. So I got there in 1968, and KISS came on the scene late 73.
We're just going to talk about first just being an art director and what it was like at that time. So these are the albums that Dennis worked on. When I was a little kid, I would look at these albums. They were coming out right when I was kind of at the age when kids start to listen to music. And I would like flip them over, look at the back and be like, cover design, inner sleeve. Sometimes it would say like art direction by Dennis Woloch. And I would think, who is this person? And how do I get that job? Or how do I interview them 40 years later? So Dennis, here's some pictures. Dennis, any commentary on these pictures?
Yeah, which one is me? Commentary. Well, the one on the left was taken at a recording studio when KISS was doing their album called Destroyer. The fellow in the middle is Gene Simmons of KISS. And the fellow on the right is Ken Kelly being a very fine illustrator. A lot of fantasy art. Like Frank Frazetta. If you don't know who Frank Frazetta is, I encourage you to look him up. He was the king of fantasy art. And I couldn't get Frank to do the job. So I found Ken. I was very lucky. And so we went down to the recording studio. They told us we had to wear white tie and tails. Not a tuxedo, but a step above a tuxedo. And so we put on our white tie and tails and we went down to the recording studio, and that's the way everybody was dressed. It was just a gimmick, really, a promotional gimmick. They had the press there. The New York Philharmonic was there because they were cutting a track on that album. And it was a big whoop-de-doo that day. The picture on the right is another photo shoot. This one was done for the album Dynasty. And we decided to put the band in straitjackets. We never used this picture in straitjackets. It was an idea that we thought was good at the time, but we didn't like it later. At the end of every photo shoot, if I could, I would ask the band if it was okay if I jumped in and had a shot taken with them. They always said, of course. And so this is that. And I made a poster of this. I have a big poster of it. So me with the band. The photographer was Francesco Scavullo. He was world famous. His thing was fashion photography. He did all the big magazine covers, Vogue, Harper's, all the highest fashion magazines that there was. And he was super well known. Every celebrity model was photographed by Scavullo. He went by, one name, like Cher and Scavullo.
Couple more pictures of Dennis. It proves he was there. We're going to talk about all this stuff in more depth about photography, photo shoots, photographers, and as well as artists like Ken Kelly, who was in the previous shot. So we see very, very wise of you, Dennis, to work your way into the photos with the band, especially.
Yes, at the time, it became very clear to me that this band is going to be world famous, and they really were world famous. From their biggest years were like 76 to 78, like in there. I mean, they were just all over the place. They were mentioned on the news, on Saturday Night Live, did sort of skits, mentioned KISS.
Yeah.
The one on the left is me in a photo studio. We're just doing a print ad for one of their albums called Kiss Alive 2. You could sort of make it out on the table there. And the photographer, David Spindell, took that shot of me. He had a little smoke machine, and there's that one. And then on the one on the right, we did fantasy photos of each member of KISS. They had their own identity, their own sort of fantasy character identity. Gene was the sort of the demon and the monster. Paul was a lover boy or some damn thing. Peter Criss was a jungle cat, and Ace was the spaceman. So we had a set built to illustrate each one of their characters. And so this was when we were doing Gene. In the background, we built the volcano, and the volcano spewed fire and sparks every 5 or 10 minutes. We had a pyrotechnician on the set, and he had to load up the volcano, and that took 10 minutes. So we'd go 1, 2, 3, bang. The sparks would fly, the smoke would go, it would be all over, and then we'd all go sit down and wait until he did it again. And that's Gene with a sword, and the sword has some blood on it. And I decided to get in the background there and look like, what the hell am I doing here? Expression on my face.
And these are just shot in Manhattan, normal Manhattan buildings, maybe a loft. Like, it wasn't the most space like we might imagine, like a studio that's outside the city, correct?
That's true. The one on the left, David had a nice space. It was downtown 17th Street, right off of Broadway. And he had a pretty good size studio, if you want to call it that. One great big room where he could build sets and move things around. But this one on the right was done by Bernard Vidal, a really terrific photographer. But his studio was on 7th Avenue at about 55th Street. I mean, it was right in Midtown. And I think he lived there also. I guess he had one room dedicated for photography, and it was a very small room. So I don't know how he managed, but he did. He managed to make it look bigger than it really was. But there were occasions when we shot with Bernard where we needed more space than his own studio. So we did rent space in Manhattan, different spots. Really, really big spaces in some cases.
A couple live shots, and there's Dennis in there again, a little later in the band's runtime with a different drummer.
Right. Well, this one on the left, we did rent a big space. You can't tell by the photo, but we were in a quite a big space. We had 3 different setups in the space. So they were all set up, and all we had to do was move the lights and move the camera, but the little setup was already there. This is for an album called Creatures of the Night. Then we moved over to the middle of the room, and we built a little stage, which is what you're looking at here. And then there was still a third setup where there were some rocks, and they were standing on the rocks, and there was a moon in the sky behind them. It was a painted backdrop. So that was a huge space, and we used it well because we didn't have to go and wait for things to be built and torn down and put back up again. They were all done. We just had to step into the set, and it was a wise use of time and space. This thing on the right is an actual stage in a theater, the Palladium in New York on 14th Street. And this was shot in the afternoon when they were just setting up and doing a sort of a rehearsal and a sound check, just to make sure everything was in place. They were getting the lighting set for the evening show. So this was not a show. This was just an afternoon working out all the details, lighting, sound, etc. I didn't usually do this, but I told the band or the stage manager, I said, a lot of the shots that I have of the band, they're not lit well. Ace will be doing a guitar solo, and he's not even in the light, standing off out of the spotlight, and the shot isn't that good. And I said, can't we work it out so that we have a spotlight for each guy? And when they do their solo, they step into the light and at least mention it to them, He said, well, why don't you go down there this afternoon and talk to the lighting guy? So that's what I did. So that's me on the stage looking up at one of the lighting guys and I'm yelling things to him. No, put it over here. No, narrow the beam, whatever the hell I was saying to the guy. But we tried to make it so that we'd have better lighting during the show for photography. And so there it is. That's what that is. That's one of my favorite pictures because I don't have anything of me actually working with the band. The other ones are all like going on the left, just standing there.
And there's you getting a little mustache tweak from Eric Carr.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. This is a nice picture also. This is done by Barry Levine, who took a lot of the more successful pictures of the band. This was during what we call the Elder era, when they did the album cover called The Elder, and they changed their costumes quite a bit. You can see Paul here has the headband, and Gene has his hair sort of in a knot, a ponytail hanging down kind of thing. They updated their look, and I like their look. It was a pretty good look.
They always kept it fresh. So, Dennis, so you just talked about the actual act of art directing in that one instance, but can you give a broader view of what it was like to be an art director? Because the term can have different meanings and probably has different meanings today, but can you talk more broadly about what it was like and your responsibilities at the time?
I may have been a little bit different than, let's say, an art director in a huge agency. They were more regimented in everybody's responsibility. Our agency wasn't that big. It changed in size quite a bit over the years. I was there for 22 years. And we had 10 people and we had 85 people at different times. And I went from staff artist to art director to creative director to vice president. So, I wore a lot of hats. When I was art director, I was pretty autonomous in that I was given the only person that I had to report to in the chain of command was Howard Marks, that you're looking at here on the left. So if I had a real problem or a question, or if I needed permission to do something, I would walk into Howard's office and say, look, this job I'm doing, I have to hire an illustrator, and I think I got to spend $3,000. What do you say? And he almost always said, sure, do it. So then I would go out and hire talent and, proceed. So I was quite autonomous, which I loved. My job would be something like this. The job gets generated somewhere along the line. We have clients. The clients talk to either Howard, who was the boss, or someone called an account executive who had to take care of that client, talk to them, understand what their needs were, generate the work. What do you need, a brochure? Oh, okay. What's that going to be about? And they would have a meeting, and then they would come back to the agency and generate a job number 502-X1. The National Institute of Infant Services. They were a diaper service. They were one of our clients. They need a brochure. We actually had diaper services back in those days, before disposable diapers. It was a fun job. I got to interview a lot of infant babies for photo shoots, and I had a good time. That job would come in the house. It would come in a folder. It would be handed to me, the art director or creative director or whatever I was. Inside would be a description of the job. It's a 4-page fold-out brochure. It's going to be in 4 colors, not black and white or 2 colors. Here's the copy. On the cover, it's going to say something, and they'll give me a headline, and the copywriter will have written all the words, all the copy. And so I would read the copy. Sometimes I'd walk into the copywriter's office and have a little sit down with her and say, how do you see this thing? What do you think? Blah, 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 blah. And we talk it over briefly, and then I'd go back and work. And I'd get out the magic markers and the tracing pad or the magic marker pad, and start doodling, sketching, making it tighter, and then eventually wind up with what we called a comprehensive, or a comp in our shorthand language. We would do a comp, and we'd have to by hand sketch out the headline in a tight looking typeface, all by hand. Draw the picture, whatever the picture was going to be, usually a mother and a baby doing something. Indicate where the body copy went by just using squiggly lines, and etc. And then the whole thing would be done that way, and we'd fold it up and make it look like a brochure, and then we'd have a meeting with the client. If the client approved it, then we would hire a photographer to bring that photo of mother and baby to the real life. I would specify the typography, which is a whole nother thing that you won't believe what we had to go through to do that, because we had things called type houses, and they would give us the typography on a piece of paper, which was black ink on a white piece of paper. And, the whole thing was all cut and paste, rubber cement, glue, on cardboard, T-squares and triangles. And we would make what you called a mechanical. It was pasted up, photos, pasted up, typography, everything in position, everything correct, everything to size. And then that would go to the printer, and, the art, like the photograph, would be separate from the mechanical. On the mechanical would be just a black and white representation of the 4-color art. But it would be cropped and sized and in position. But then I would say, this is art A. And then I would have a transparency or a slide or something, or a print in color, and then I would mark that art A. And the printer puts all that together photomechanically, and then plates are made that goes on the press, and the damn thing gets printed. But there's so many steps.
And we're going to show some of those steps and mechanicals, and we're going to talk about type specking as well. But that's cool. I wanted to hear that, like, top down.
Well, that's the skinny,
Yeah, because a lot of people don't, a lot of people today might not understand that. And especially, I didn't necessarily know how much autonomy you got. I've heard your other interviews, but it sounds like you were in a pretty unique position, especially.
And, I was very lucky, and I was really the boss, so it was fun.
Nice.
Yep.
All right. So we'll get down to kind of some of the specifics. First thing I wanted to talk about with you, Dennis, is working with logos and line art. What we call line art is usually like flat, one-color art, often black. So this is the original sketch of the KISS logo, which was done by Ace Frehley, the guitar player. Yeah, he included lips and a dot on the eye, but other than that, you can see that this is pretty much what the logo became, and it was modified, cleaned up by Paul Stanley, guitar player, and hand-drawn by the band over the years, or the first year or two, and sent out flyers and press kits. And then, of course, the logo is ubiquitous, eventually became a big part of the band's stage show, big light-up signs, also on the bass drum head. And Dennis, you had a role in this even before you officially worked with the band. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's true. In the early going, they were doing rehearsals down at the Fillmore East, the very famous rock and roll venue back then in the 70s. They had the Fillmore West and they had the Fillmore East. And they had every big name eventually play at that place. It's a really legendary place. I guess it was 74 when they were just getting started. And Bill O'Coin, their manager, who shared office space with us in the ad agency in the early days, he came to me and he said, hey, Dennis, they're going to be doing a rehearsal down at the Fillmore this afternoon or this evening. And I have this logo, and it was a logo cut out of plexiglass, I think. And then it was painted like you see, black outline with sparkles that were glued on. But it was cut out. It was all cut out. It wasn't on that bass drum. And he said, can you help him out? Can you go down there and glue this on the bass drum? And I guess they thought, well, I'm an artist. I know how to glue things onto other things. Yeah. So I said, sure, why not? Sounds like fun. So I bought some 5-minute epoxy and I took a cab and I went downtown and I got the bass drum head and glued it on and, gave it to some stage guy and he stuck it onto the drum. And that was it. I think it stayed like that for quite a while.
Good job gluing. But yeah, hey, well, I mean, maybe things wouldn't have worked out the way they did if you hadn't been the gluer.
Right. I remember it was very cold that day. I don't know, just cold in the old Fillmore.
Maybe that helped the glue adhere. So the first three albums actually were before Dennis was involved, before Dennis's agency, Howard Marks, was involved with Kiss. But so this is 73, 74, but 75 is when Dennis came in. Again, we're talking about line art, logos, and things like that. So this was the first album Dennis worked on, Kiss Alive, 1975. Coincidentally, or maybe not, the album that really broke the band. This is a vector version. We're in a design group. We can say vector, a vector version of the Kiss logo, modern version, and vector version with a gradient. But I'm going to go back to my own tour book from 77, 78. And let's take a look at the logo as it was back then. And let's also take a look at the Kiss Destroyer version of the logo 1 year later. So we have gradients in here. We have the outline. And so, Dennis, I just want to see if you could talk a little bit about the process of how that kind of line art was created.
Paul Stanley, the one you mentioned earlier, the one who you said cleaned up Ace's version, and he cleaned it up, but it still was terrible. I mean, it really wasn't repro ready. We don't really have a sample of it here, but it was rough. Ace's version was beyond rough, and then Paul's was better, but it was still rough. There was none of these here. I had a guy who I used for a lot of mechanical work. He was a non-creative guy, but he could do anything mechanically beautifully. He did airbrush work, and he did scratch board. And I don't know if any of you know what that is, but I gave him the rough version, and I said, we got to make this, mechanically perfect, crisp edges and sharp lines, and better, way better. So he did, and it's one of those previous images you had, the black and white image, which was just that one, like that, and that's probably what he did right there.
Right. So even though this one, the tour book version might look a little blurry, that also can be from the printing, correct?
Yeah, I don't know why that looks not perfect, but we had a much better version than that. I mean, the corners were sharp. You can see they're round in here. I don't know why. I don't know how that got to be like that. That's a mystery.
Well, here's a sharper. I mean, even though
Destroyer, yeah, because I did that mechanical, and so I used a good logo. Even though that's a huge enlargement, so you're not seeing it in the best light, but yeah, you can tell that that's a better one.
And let's talk about this. On the back of the album here, on the back of Kiss Alive, we have not just the Kiss logo, but we have, and it is kind of blurry, but we have the Kiss logo, and it's in line with the text, and you have Gibson guitar, Pearl drums logo. So how did you lay this out, and how did you allow space, guess at the space for something like putting the logo in line?
Wow. Well, I mean, it's almost instinct, when you're doing these things every day. But we ordered type from the type house, so I have to specify the type. So I have on a typewritten, like a typewriter, sheet of paper, it says Kiss Fan Mail, P.O. Box 5270, blah, blah, blah. I don't know how it's typed on the typewritten sheet. It could be all in one line. It could be broken. The lines could be broken much different than this. So I would indicate that I want 4 separate lines, and I would with a pen or a pencil, I would make line breaks. There's a symbol for that, and I would say break the line here, break the line here, break it here, break it here, and then I would say I want 4 flush left lines in Helvetica 12 point on 2 points of lead. That would be the way you would express that would be Helvetica 12 on 14, which we have on our computer now, and you can see it when you're setting type. Your little type palette. So, but you would write it out right on that typewritten page. You would write it out. So you make all these little marks, and knowing that I would eventually cut out the word KISS that they gave me in typography and substitute it with a little photostat of the KISS logo and put it in place.
Got it. And
with glue.
Right. Yeah. We have examples of mechanicals later. And then we also have the KISS Army logo that Dennis designed. And, often we talk about how a logo needs to be reproduced in embroidery, or maybe it's in one color. And here's examples where it actually is not just produced in embroidery, but in a metal badge. And there's the KISS Army logo from a tour book back in the 70s. Let's see here. So I did want to see if we could talk about Rapidographs, but Dennis, any additional information, or can we talk about like the actual act of how somebody might have created that line art?
Right. Well, I did the mechanical myself. My friend Vinny, who I worked with alongside in the art department, started to work on the KISS Army logo, but I didn't really want him to do it. I wanted to do it myself. So I kind of stopped him before he got too far. And the only thing he had really done was he was drawing some chevrons. You know what a chevron is? Picture a sergeant's insignia that he would wear on his shoulder on his Army uniform, and you got the stripes, So he was drawing some of those, so evoking a military look. So I said, yeah, Vin, that's a good idea, military kind of a look maybe. And I took the job away from him, and then I proceeded to design this. So I sat there and I drew that shape, and it was all done in black ink on a white illustration board. But in some areas, and I thought I was going to use rapidograph pens like you're showing here at first. However, you see where it says that says waterproof. Well, the ink that we were using was not waterproof. So therefore, I did not use a rapidograph. That would have ordinarily been used because they make a very fine line and you get lovely results. I used something like a Pentel that you could just buy, and it was something brand new, just came out. Very fine line black marker, almost as fine as a rapidograph, but it was permanent. The ink was permanent because I knew I was making a master logo and I was going to hang around for years, and I didn't want it to be affected by somebody's wet hands and they would smear the ink because it's not waterproof. So I found this permanent pen that had a very fine point, and I did the word Army with that and maybe some of the other work. Some of the other work was done by cutting out film, like the outline, the thick red outlines. I think I cut film for that. So when you cut film, you get really precise, sharp corners and etc. So I was just making up my mind as I was going along, what materials to use, how to approach it, what's going to be good, what's not going to be good. The KISS logo is just a photostat of their good logo, which I put in place. And then on an overlay, it was all done in black and white. And it took me like a day to work out that Army lettering. I'm not a letterer, but I decided to tackle it, and that's what I did. And then on an overlay, I indicated what's going to be what color. So you could point at the area that's going to be yellow and say, this yellow is in 4-color process printing. This yellow will be made out of 100% yellow and 20% magenta. The red will be made out of 100% magenta and 100% yellow. The black is 100% black, and et cetera. And that's what I would indicate on the overlay, which is just a piece of tissue where you can see the artwork behind, and I can indicate colors or any other instructions to the printer that I had to indicate. Yeah. I had a piece of 4-color artwork with the KISS logo with the gradient on it. And the same guy that cleaned it up for me in black and white, because he did airbrush work, I gave him the job of making a color version with the gradient.
Oh, I never knew that. I thought it was maybe a Letraset.
No, it was done in airbrush as a piece of flat artwork, and then I had it copied on large format color film, like an 8x10 camera.
Right, nice and big, so you could always reduce it down and tighten it up.
Right.
Very cool. I did not know that about the airbrushing or it being color. Even though you didn't use Rapidograph, can you? And by the way, everybody, that's 0.5 millimeter size right there. Dennis, can you talk just for a moment about what a rapidograph was and how they were used?
Well, it's a pen with that came with all different size points, but rapidographs were technical pens. They were used, I think, a lot by technical artists, not necessarily graphic designers. I think that's what they were invented for. Guys who did technical drawings. I mean, like not really creative stuff, like engineers that had to get that would draw a gear, a gear with 182 teeth on it or something, and it had to be technically drawn at some point. And they would use these fine point pens. Rapidograph is what they were called by a company called Kohinoor. I don't know what brand you have. Yeah, Kohinoor. There it is. They were lovely things, and we loved them. And so graphic designers, realized right away that they'd be very handy. And every art department had a set of rapidographs.
Yeah. If you went to school for design or art in the 90s or earlier, you probably had to buy a set. You probably had a painful time cleaning them because you had to clean them out. It was a whole process.
They were sort of a pain in the neck. Yeah, they clogged up, and but when they worked, they were the tool to use. I mean, there's also something called a ruling pen.
I don't know if I ever used one, so you could explain.
So before rapidographs, it was ruling pens and compasses that you would put ink in, and you could draw perfect circles and things like that.
Manual process.
Before computers, we had a lot of stuff in the art department. I mean, a lot of technical stuff to help us do, like perfect circles drawn in ink and perfect straight lines and T-squares and triangles and rubber cement, two different kinds of rubber cement, not just one, and on and on and on and on. I mean, razor blades and X-Acto knives all over the place, spray bottles of different crap, and just that's a photostat camera.
And can you explain how and why that was used?
When you prepare art for the printer, you have to do what's called a mechanical, and which is essentially a paste up of the printed piece, but it's precise. So let's say you are I'll just do like a simple one, like a 1-page flyer, let's say 8.5 by 11. So you get your piece of illustration board, whiteboard, put it on your drawing table, tape it down so it doesn't move. Take your T-square and triangle and draw out a rectangle that's 8.5 by 11, because that's the size of your printed piece. Usually we would use a pen that we had called non-repro blue. It's just a ballpoint pen, but it had a special color to it, which is sort of a pale blue. So that when that was photographed by the printer or something, it wouldn't photograph. It would disappear. It was just there for the artist's reference. So you knew what your parameters were, 8.5, 11. So within that 8.5, 11 area, you would paste up and design your item, whatever it was. Like I said before, perhaps it was a flyer that was just going to be handed out. A handbill. On the handbill would be a headline. Kiss appearing tonight at the Diplomat Hotel, 8 o'clock. And you would set that in type at the typographer, and you would indicate to him, I want this done in 72-point Helvetica bold. And it would come back to you the next day, by the way, folks. You'd wait for it. Things weren't instant. That was the typographer, and he gave you a piece of paper with the type on it, which you would glue on the back, cut it out, and stick it in position. So you would make it two sides. Now, if it came back from the typographer not exactly the size you wanted, you had to fit it into a certain area on your mechanical. Then you would send it to the photostat guy, this guy, and you would measure, let's say, the longest line that you had to fit inside the 8.5. So you would make it, let's say you wanted it to be 7.5, so that you would have a half an inch on either side. So you would take your line of type, which was now 12 inches, and you would measure it, and you could say 12 to 7.5. One glossy second print. Second print meaning a positive, because the first print they made would be a negative in this camera. And it would come back with white lettering on a black background. Sometimes you wanted that, but in this case, no. And so you say second print. So then they would take the negative they just made, and then they would photograph that, and then give you back their second print, which would be a positive, and then that's what you would get. And you slap glue on the back, cut it out, and you put it into position. So the photostat camera was for that. Also, now you have a photograph of Kiss. You want to show Kiss. Well, let's say it's a color photograph, even though this flyer is going to be in black and white. So you take the color photograph and you measure it, a part of it, and you know what size it is, and it's usually too small. So it'd be like 3 inches. And you say, okay, I want that to be as big as possible on this flyer. Oh, 7.5 again. So you go 3 to 7.5. And you want one matte positive or second print. He would shoot that 2 sides, and he'd have a negative. You shoot the negative, make a positive, second print. You'd get that back. And it's a very poor photographic rendition of what you gave him. It's not meant for reproduction. It's meant for size and position. You would trim that out exactly the way you want it in a rectangle and paste that down. Now, you're getting rid of superfluous stuff in the background, stuff you don't want to, you're not going to be printing. And you trim it out just the way you want it, nice and perfect. And that goes in position on that 8.5, 11, wherever you want it. And you glue it there. Then there's more type, more information that you get from the typographer. And usually that size is good. Glue it, stick it down. And that goes to the printer, but goes to the printer with the original art, the photograph of the band. And he will shoot that, translate it into a black and white piece of film, and when they print it, it'll come out in black and white. So that's kind of what you have to do, and that's what photostat cameras were for. They were for helping you put things down in position to size, and it would show the cropping, the way you trimmed it out. And a lot of times on the photostat that we pasted down, we would put the words FPO, and that stands for position only. It's telling the printer, don't go shooting this crappy thing and printing from it. You know, we have a piece of real good artwork here, which is attached. So FPO for position only.
And we're going to have examples of that in a moment too. And also halftones, if anything was continuous tone, like a black and white photo or color photo or black and white line art, you needed to convert it to halftones. It's ironic. Now we might make fake halftones that are really large, but you needed to shoot a real photo to get a halftone.
Yeah, they can't print continuous tone. No way to do that. They have to print in little tiny dots. That's the way the printing process works. So your continuous tone or your lovely photograph, we're talking black and white now, will be shot through a screen. Oh, here they are right there on your left. They had different screens for different resolutions, different DPI. So newspaper would use very coarse screen. It would be 65 dots per inch. Because newspaper is printed on crappy newsprint paper. Anything finer than that would be a waste of time. It would just blur into the poor paper. So they used a nice coarse screen, and the photographs would look better on that bad paper. But if you're printing in a magazine or something, or doing high quality printing, they would use a very fine screen. I think most printing was done in around 260 dots per inch. And it was, it looked beautiful.
Sounds right. Better quality paper means a finer screen.
You were able to use a finer screen because it would take better on the paper.
All right, good. Thank you, Dennis. That was covering some line art, logos, and other pieces. Let's talk about, we've actually covered some of this. We're going to talk about working with type. And my initial question was, how do you get this white text on a colored background, or how do you define this red text? You actually kind of cover that, but I think we're going to jump in. I'm going to show you a mechanical example in a moment of an actual album cover. But for a moment, you asked me to talk about the Haber rule. Can you explain what this was used for?
Every art department had one of these little guys in their possession. This is when you specify type. If I could remember exactly how you specify that, because it was a little complicated. And I have one of these. I still have one somewhere here.
I believe once you pick the typeface, they would tell you down to the 10th of an inch how many characters on average could fit per inch. Is that correct?
Yeah, something like that, Steve. When you got a typewritten sheet of copy, a couple of paragraphs of copy for whatever project you're working on, let's say it's a magazine ad, and there would be, more than just a couple of lines of type. It would be a couple of paragraphs. So you have to figure out how to get all of that into the space on your layout. you would count literally by hand the number of characters in a line of typewritten text on that sheet of paper. And then you would look in your book, in your type specking book, it would tell you that 10-point Helvetica gets 1.78 characters per pica. So you would take your Haber rule and measure your picas on your layout. You say, I'm going to have a text box that's going to be 22 picas wide. And then by division and et cetera, and some good old long alphabet and arithmetic, you would figure out, if I set this in 10-point Helvetica, it will go this deep. And, that's too deep, and it won't fit. I have to let's try 9-point. And then you try 9-point, you say, that'll fit. And then you wind up telling your typographer, I want you to set this text on the typewritten page in 9/11 Helvetica at 22 picas wide. And you will know when it comes back that it's going to be about 3 1/8 inches deep. You'll know that because you just worked it out on your drawing table. And then you cut it out and stick it down. But, I mean, that's how you figured out where your type is going to go and if it's going to fit. And this Haber rule had all of these little increments, and you could see the 6 means 6-point type. That's what that means. And this is your depth and et cetera. So 6 up to 12 point. Flip it over, you got 13 and 15. This is for your typewriter. Some typewriters typed in pica, and some typewriters were a little bit smaller, and they typed in elite back in the day. So some people were using different typewriters, so you had to computate based on what typewriter they were using.
Yeah, it makes working in InDesign and other software seem even better now, remembering this process. And speaking of the process, I finally we get to see an actual mechanical I found online. So when Dennis explained getting type back from a type service bureau, working with black and white logos, pasting it up. You can see he had to define a logo here. This is what Dennis referenced as a crappy for placement only image.
But what it does is it shows you how it's cropped, the space around his head, the actual size that his head is going to be on the album cover, because on the original art that I give him, it's not this size. It's a different size. And so the photostat serves that purpose: sizing, proportion, and trimming. Now you can see how the KISS logo looks and how his name looks versus what's on the mechanical here. Of course, this paper, because it's so old, is turning yellow, but it was white. This is all pure white paper at one point.
And if we jump back, we can barely see, but at the top here, this seems to be an overlay that Dennis also referenced, which we're gonna actually see some overlays in a bit from a different project. But this is where the instructions to the printer would have been. This sheet would flip down, and there would be instructions from Dennis to the printer on sizing and color and anything else.
Sure, and I would tell him things like the logo drops out white. So what's black on the logo will become pure white, dropped out, or DO. We used to use a lot of abbreviations back then. I would indicate this lettering had to be 80% yellow and 30% blue. I'm guessing right now, but that would make this lovely green.
Imagine that process, everybody who's here in 2025, which is everybody. And even the asterisks and superscripts you had to manually paste up. It looks like you got this whole chunk, or you probably got all the song titles centered. I assume they're centered because it's one big block, but you had to slice it up a little to get the superscripts and asterisks in there.
Well, yeah, when I spec the type, I would say centered lines, and with a lot of whatever the leading is in between there. And do you guys still call it leading?
Yeah.
Line spacing?
Well, Canva calls it line spacing, but we still say leading.
You use Canva?
No, nobody in this group, I'm sure.
Because why? Why was it called leading, everybody?
Wasn't that a space for lead between the lines on an old typesetting or movable type printer?
So when you set type in the olden days, it was set in metal. The way you would put space in between each line would be blank slugs of lead.
It's a good thing they didn't use aluminum, because that would be hard to say. Dennis, you've talked about this before as well. So you talked about how on this album cover you wanted it came out, it was a best of, very early best of album, double platinum representing 1 million sales. So you wanted double Kiss logos and you wanted that type to fit in between.
Yeah, I knew I wanted something very bold and very, very condensed. I could have ordered Helvetica extra condensed black or bold or whatever, or some other typeface that would have done the trick. But I don't know. There's no way of knowing offhand if I made it that the width that I wanted to make it would it fill the exact height also that I wanted. And no, probably wouldn't have. It would have come up too tall or too short, depending on the proportions of those letters and that typeface. But I knew a company called Photo Lettering. I knew that they could manipulate type. They're really the only ones that I knew of in New York at the time. They had a type specimen book that was bigger than the Yellow Pages. I mean, it was fat. They had more stuff in there. It would make your head spin. But you can see here, back in the 60s or early 70s, they were getting pretty sophisticated. Frankly, I don't know how they did it. They didn't have computers, but they had cameras that could distort, I guess.
I don't know how they did it either. I still don't understand.
We have to ask Michael Dorette someday, because one of his first jobs as a young designer, he worked for this company, and he would know. So I knew they could do what I wanted. So I said, I found some typeface in their specimen book. I said, in this typeface, whatever it was, and I don't think it had a name. I think it had a number, which like ridiculous. I said, in this typeface, make it 11 inches wide, but it also has to be 1 3/16 inches tall at the same time. And they did that.
You made them do the work.
Yeah.
Why not?
I'm no dummy.
Excellent. So here's Letraset. People might not be familiar with this, but it's press-on type or sometimes tones or patterns, or Letratone, I guess, Letra was a brand. So I was going to ask if you used this, Dennis, but then I found this Letraset called Shocked, and I went to the album Kiss Killers, and I thought, I think Dennis used it. Did you actually use Letraset for this?
Absolutely.
Why make it more complicated, right?
I was knocking out. This is a fast job. I didn't have to go and scratch my head and think about it. It's I had a photo I knew I was going to use, and it was another best of album. So there's no high concept here. I didn't have to think about anything. This is all photo, by the way. That background is not something graphically added, like with a silhouetted photo onto a background. That's all photo. That's Barry Levine set that up. And so all I really had to do is crop that photo the way I wanted and add the logo and the word Killers. So I just thought about the word Killers, and I said, well, let me make it look, shocky and wacky. And I didn't use the one called Shock. There was another brand that I used maybe, and I think it was called Shattered.
Oh, I think I might have said it wrong. I think, I think that is it. Yeah. And you just rub down with pencil on this top sheet, correct, to press it onto the board underneath.
I rubbed it down on a piece of illustration board, cleaned it up because it probably cracked a little bit on the way, and got funky. But so I cleaned it up and sent it out for a photostat so that it wouldn't be delicate and prone to getting scratched. Because Letraset is, when you rub it down, I mean, you could take something sharp, and if you hit it the wrong way, it's going to scrape off. Right. As you recall. So I got a photostat of it, so we're much more durable on the mechanical.
That makes sense. Why risk the original getting damaged?
Right.
All right. We talked about type. Now we're going to talk about art and artists. So Dennis, we talked about all this beforehand, but we'll talk a little bit about like what it was like for you as the art director. They had the concept for the album. The Kiss's management comes to you and says the album title will be this. You probably didn't have much other info. You didn't hear the music, and you would come up with a concept, and then you would have to find an artist or a photographer to fulfill that. So let's talk about that process, and I'll go through these illustrations with you of your methodology.
The first album I had to do for Kiss from concept, from blank brain, from scratch, was Destroyer. The concept for Destroyer was these guys look fantastic. Their costumes are fantastic. It's fantasy, and I want to put them in a kind of a superhero mode image. And we had the title Destroyer before we did the illustration. So I'm thinking, well, I want to show them. It'd be the first time that you could see them in all their glory. If you looked at the first three that you showed earlier, the first album was just faces. The second album was like an artistic, designy looking thing where you don't really see their costumes. You don't get the superhero vibe. The third one was completely off the wall. They're wearing little suits, which was kind of funny, but it didn't really do the job of presenting them as what they were, which was these fantastic four characters right out of a Marvel movie or a comic book or something. So that's what I wanted to show for the first time. So I wanted to use Frank Frazetta. Frazetta does fantasy art. Frazetta did Conan the Barbarian, if you remember that stuff. Swords and Dragon, Blood. He has one called Death Dealer, where there's this guy who was in like a knight would wear, but much more gothic and scary, and he's sitting on a black horse. So I wanted to use him. I found him. He was a legend even at that time almost. And long story short, I couldn't use him. He wanted a lot of money, and I didn't think I could get that amount of money. So I was back to square one. What am I going to do? I knew one or two guys in my mind from memory who did that type of work. But to me, they weren't cutting it. They didn't have the chops. I took a walk at lunchtime one day, and I went to where I knew a comic book store was, and there's this guy. That's probably the very store. I doubt it. But there was a big comic book store on 58th Street. It had a lot of stuff. I think they sold little action figures also and games and a lot of comics. And I stood in front of that wall of comics, and there was many dozens of them there. And I just stared at the wall, and I was almost in a panic mode at this time. I was feeling a lot of pressure to do a good job. It was the first album I was doing from scratch, like I said. The one I did before, I had photographs. I just kind of, I just designed. But this, I had to think and use my brain and show people that I was a good guy with concepts. And so I was almost in a panic situation. I was very stressful. And then I see this comic called Creepy, and I had a painting of this robot, and I loved the quality of it. And I loved the feeling that the guy evoked. It was not only his ability, his artistic ability to paint. There's Ken Kelly, the artist. Not only his ability to paint it, but his ability to bring emotion to the painting. And I thought that was great. I thought that was key. And if you look at it, this is a robot, right? This is not a human being. But if this damn robot is not showing some kind of pathos, I'll be a monkey's uncle. There's all kinds of feeling coming out of this guy who's made out of metal. So that appealed to me. So I bought the thing. I brought it back to the agency. I sat at my desk. I opened it up, and I'm looking for a credit. Now, I can't read his signature on the front. I don't know what the hell that says. He made the K's really odd. He's got Ken Kelly, 2 K's. I don't know, what's going on. So I look inside where usually they'll have credits on the publisher and the printer and this and that and the other thing, all that information. And it didn't say cover art by anybody. So I found the art director of the magazine, and I call up Warren Publishing, and I get this guy, whatever his name was. And I said, how you doing? I like this creepy album cover, and I like that art, and I have a project, and I want to hire this artist for the project. And he says to me, oh, yeah, I represent him. Now, obviously, he's lying to me because he wants a piece of the action. I said, you do not represent him. Give me his goddamn phone number. So he broke down, and he did. I get Ken's phone number. I call him up, and I said, can you bring some of your other work? Because the album I have the album cover I'm designing has people on it, not robots. And so, and you have to do their likenesses. You have to be pretty good by capturing their likenesses. I have to look like that. So bring stuff in, show me other work, show me people. So I brought in a bunch of his paintings, and I was absolutely convinced that he could do this job. So I described the job to him. I say, you're hired. And I stood on a chair and I said, look at me, look up at me. I want them to look big. And I got my hands in the air and I said, I want them to look this way and that way, and superheroes and larger than life. And, they wear these wonderful costumes, and, he got it. And this brown one, we call it the brown version, is the first one he did. And I think it's wonderful. The reason why it's horizontal like that, ladies and gentlemen, is we're doing the front cover and the back cover all in one shot. So the job would be folded right down the middle. It's printed as one piece. They don't print the front and then somehow go and print the back. That whole thing is printed in one shot. So we produced the artwork that way. Probably didn't have to, but we did. Somewhere in the middle of this job, they changed their costume design. And so we asked poor Ken to do a second version. And he did. And so he did that, this version here that you're looking at now. I guess that's the painting after many years of wear and tear. Where did you get this from? That auction site?
Yeah, so non-Kiss fans, I know there's only a couple of you out there. These were only recently discovered in the past year or two.
Yes, it was thought that they were lost forever.
Yeah. So right. So there were slides taken of these. I'm sure that there's still clean versions of them that were used for the reproduction and then probably hopefully scanned digitally. But these are the originals recently discovered, not in the best condition. But it's cool to see that they still exist, because nobody even knew if they did for a long time or where they were.
I talked to the fellow who bought the original Destroyer art, the one that was used, on the album cover. This guy contacted me because he's a big collector. Well, he wanted some things from me. He wanted a letter of authenticity and all that stuff. I said, so you're the guy who bought it? He said, don't tell anybody my name. I said, okay, I won't. He swore me to secrecy. But do you know what he paid for this?
That's what I was going to ask you. No, I don't.
Everybody, are you ready? $500,000.
Damn. Well, you know what? It doesn't surprise me. It is iconic, and I have to assume that even if you're not a Kiss fan, you've seen.
I thought it would go for 15 or 20 grand. Other collectors were bidding on it, and he got it. But he said I had to sell some stuff. But I got $500,000.
And in the interest of time, I'm going to move quickly, but here's more Ken Kelly. He did another album cover for Kiss, Love Gun, which came a little later. He used his wife as a model for all the women in it. And he also produced these concepts. You saw these back in the day, Dennis?
Say that again?
Were these concepts things that you saw initially before?
Well, this one you're looking at was the first concept for Love Gun, and it was my concept. Now, I don't like what Ken did here. The way he's got them all bunched up and crowded together was not right. He did follow my instructions, kind of. This I had nothing to do with. Ken did that on his own. Ken made a little mini career after he did these jobs for Kiss. And he went to Kiss conventions and expos which they have around the country. Very popular. A lot of people, vendors, and they just sell Kiss stuff. And he made he said 50% of my income is from doing Kiss stuff. I said, I put you on the map, Ken. I said, if it wasn't for me. He laughed. He had to agree.
Of course, you walked into a comic book store and picked out from that one. He
was getting $150 to do those comic book covers.
And how much did you pay him for?
$5,000.
Which in today's dollar, I think is around 15 grand.
So he never saw so much money in his life. That's why when I asked him to do it again, because they changed costumes midstream from the brown to the blue, he didn't really complain. He went and he did it,
Yeah, that's what I was going to bring up. So another artist is Michael Durrett, who you mentioned briefly earlier, and a totally different style, really a graphic style. This is Kiss Rock and Roll Over, and this is actually Michael's very tight pencil drawing. So we're going to see some of his pieces, but here's the final album. Can you talk a bit? And Michael sent some sketches that show not this project. I don't think he took photos of his process for Rock and Roll Over, but of another process. So can you talk a little bit about how Michael works?
Yeah, well, Michael is a a technician, non-approachable. I mean, he's just so good. He's a real professional. He knows the printing process upside down and inside out. So when he's designing, he's already, 9 steps ahead of a lot of other people that may be. I mean, some people would say, "Oh, I don't know, make this red. Here's a sample of the red I want," but not Michael. He was very astute, very knowledgeable. This is a job he did for a Japanese project, and he told me that when he did Rock and Roll Over for me, that this was his own inspiration. He wanted to do it like this, and he sure did. So if you look at it, you can see the similarities. There you go. I hired Michael to do this job, which came right after Destroyer. Destroyer being oil painting, fantasy art, very voluptuous, very romantic, if you know what I mean. And I wanted to do something totally different. And so I thought Michael was the man for that, who would do a very mechanically sharp, flat art. So that's the reason I chose Michael. And Michael sent me this to show, because I told him I wanted to show the overlay work that you did for Rock and Roll Over, but he didn't have it. And he said, that went to you. And I said, yeah, I did see it, but now that got lost. That went to the KISS archive. The short story, everybody, is KISS sued our agency at one point, and they took all the artwork. It's in some warehouse somewhere, maybe. So he sent me this instead, which shows from his original very loose pencil doodle on tracing paper to his tight drawing. This, yeah, there it is, loose as can be, to this. I mean, and look at that thing. I mean, that's all done very precisely. So then he went over that with black ink, right? And this is just one of the layers. I mean, there's other layers, that show for different colors and what have you, all broken down. And then on his overlay, on his tracing paper overlay, we call this thing a color break, which is short for color breakdown. And you can see his instructions to the printer, stuff I was talking about before, giving percentages. Now, I was giving percentages of 4-color process ink, cyan, magenta, etc. But he's giving percentages of Pantone colors, which you see on the left there. Yep, there you go. So we printed it in Pantone or spot color, they may call that now, instead of 4-color process. This way you get an exact color. And for the kind of work that Michael does, that's the way you would do it. In other words, he didn't produce this artwork in 4 colors. He produced it in black and white with overlay instructions.
And not just the exact color, but there's no screening here. Everything, if you were to zoom in with a loop, you'd see totally flat, right?
Totally flat. So what you get is beautiful printing.
Yeah, if anyone, you have to see any kind of screen print in person to appreciate it. And as a designer, zoom on in. And I did.
Oh, hey.
So I recreated a separation, like a manual separation process like Michael did, which apparently, this is just me. Yeah, this is just me. But this is, apparently that's what he put together by hand.
Well, yeah, Michael did this job on acetate overlays for each color with ink. We had acetate back then called prepared acetate. And so you could draw on it with a rapidograph or any other ink onto the acetate, and it wouldn't bubble up or crawl like it would on regular acetate. You couldn't do it. But this prepared acetate, you could draw on it and it would stay put. So he did many overlays. They all had to be registered so that when they were printed, they would go in the right position and not shift. Besides being a fantastic designer and artist, he's a fantastic technician.
It felt like he understood the technology so deeply that he built his technique around it.
That's true. Yeah.
And this was printed just like the previous piece. The initial run was printed not in 4-color CMYK process, but was printed with spot color.
On a 6-color press, not a 4-color press. And that's very, very, very unusual. You can see these presses are modular. So these are what they call stations. So that thing that says Champion on it, that's one station. And then the thing behind it is just another station for another color. And the thing behind that is another station for another color, and on and on. And you can hook these things up like a train. I don't know what the limit would be, but we did 6 colors, each one for a flat color Pantone.
And that was quite unusual in the mid-70s, correct?
Very unusual, actually a technical achievement.
I never realized they were modular. Now I see it. They just literally connect
them up. Yep.
All right, we're going to talk about another artist. I'm going to move a little quicker just to keep us kind of in the time frame. I know we're going to go long. This is Eraldo Carregati, who did the iconic Kiss solo albums from 1978, when each band member put out their own solo album as a kind of, attempt to be unified when they're having some internal strife. So Dennis was the one who commissioned these portraits, which you still see today. So can you talk a little bit about working with Eraldo? Dennis, please.
This was, at the time, and maybe still the biggest project for Kiss, the most prestigious. Again, here comes the stress to come up with something. Hey, Dennis, they're going to come up with 4 solo albums. Do something. And then they walk away from me. The first thought would have been, because they are their own characters, Ace being the spaceman and Paul being the lover, what the hell did he call himself? I don't know. Starchild. Gene being the demon and the lizard monster. Peter Criss being the cat, jungle cat. So the first thought that actually came into my head was, I will build an elaborate set for each guy and put him in his character environment. And boy, oh boy, won't that be glorious and fantastic. Then I thought about it more, and I said, no, that won't be glorious and fantastic. It'll be glorious and fantastic for 1 year, and then it'll just become old hat. And their costumes change over the years, so it'll look dated right away. And my real main goal here was to make this timeless, but it wouldn't have any dated quality to it. And I tried really hard to do that. So I said, I'm going to do a portrait of each guy. And it's a solo album, we'll just do a portrait. Now, the portrait could have been a photograph, but if I did the exact thing I have here, but I did it in photographic terms, I mean, I don't know if you could picture that, but, it would have been like not as magical, not as wonderful. And I kind of worked that out in my brain, and I said, even if it's a really nice photo, it won't have that timeless, magical quality feeling that I'm trying to get here. So now the task became to find an artist that could do this justice. Vinny and I, my partner in the art department at the time, we went through a lot of book illustrators' work, and I found one guy that I thought would have been good, and he did a layout. It wasn't bad. He did a sketch. It wasn't bad, but it didn't knock me out, so we kept looking. Vinny found this guy, Eraldo Carregati. Him? Hi, Eraldo. He's in heaven now. But it was some piece of art that, it was odd. It was a man's face, but it was very, very odd. And I said, I'm having trouble. I can't make that leap in my brain of this guy who did this to do Kiss. Then he said, I don't know, he's got something. I said, yeah, I guess, I don't know. I said, I'll give him a shot. So I called him, and I told him the project, and I gave him photos for reference, and I said, can you give me something? Don't go to finish. Just give me something to show me kind of maybe what it's going to look like. So he did a pretty tight little painting of somebody. I don't know if he did all 4. I don't think so. And it wasn't great. It was okay. But it was not a finished piece. I know it was just a sketch. I know, blah, 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 blah. So I couldn't judge it 100% on that. And I'm an art director, and I'm supposed to be able to do these things. I'm supposed to be able to visualize it a few steps further down the line. But it was hard. But you know what? We were getting close to deadline, and I hired him. Now, he was in Chicago, and he went to work. So when he was 3/4 or more than 3/4 done, I went out to Chicago to look over his shoulder and make sure. He couldn't take a picture of it and email it to me. Would have to mail it overnight with FedEx or something. So I just got on a plane and I went out there, and I'm looking over his shoulder, and I think it was I don't know who it was. It might have been Gene. It was looking fantastic. It was just looking fantastic. I said, this is going to be really, really beautiful. But one thing that wasn't happening was he was doing the backlighting on their hair, but he was going to do them all in just like white backlighting, like just a white light or a yellow light, but they were all going to have that same look, all the same touch. I said, wait, stop. I said, we got to do something. I said, years ago, I did a little job. Here it is with their, this was like their signature pins or pendants. And they sold them in the, at the cash register in the supermarket. When I did it, I gave each guy a color just to make them differentiate one from the other. So at that time, I had to think up a color for each guy. So I did. Gene is obviously red for blood and fire because that's his thing. And on, the rest. It came to me while I was standing there looking at Geraldo paint. I said, I actually assigned a color to these guys. I never thought I'd have to use it again, but here we go. So I said, you got a PMS book? He said, yep, got the PMS book, the little color chips, which you just saw previously at Michael's job. And I picked out a red for Gene and et cetera, the blue, purple, and the green for each guy. And I said, this is what the backlighting should be for each guy. Thank God I thought of that because it would have been not quite as great, The other thing that I had to fix, if you want to call it that, while I was standing there, he had each guy's neck area truncated. It just stopped abruptly. And it looked funny. It looked like they were decapitated or something. So I said, you have an airbrush artist? He worked in a large place which had a photography studio. They had airbrush renderers. They had guys who could render in pastel chalk and magic markers. I mean, beautiful stuff. The way agencies did it in the olden days. They had real specialized skills. And one job would go from one guy's desk to the next guy's desk to the next guy, like a factory. So one guy was good at lettering. The next guy could really render beautifully in pastel chalk, etc. So he worked in a large place like that. I said, you got an airbrush artist? He said, right down there. We took his painting, went down there. We said, can you fade his neck? Let's see what it looks like. Fade to black. So he did it. And I said, that's it. Do all four that way. And there you go. And that's the portrait. And it knocked everybody's socks off who saw it, just beautiful. Then Bill O'Coin came in. Bill O'Coin, because his manager, came in and he looked at Gene and he said, Gene spits blood. And part of his act. He said, you think we could do a little something? So Geraldo goes into his pocket. He's wearing a nice little sports jacket and a tie, he was such a gentleman. He goes into his pocket, old world, takes out a little piece of cardboard with dried up lumps of paint. These things were done in gouache, if you know what that is. It's a watercolor that comes in tubes. But it's a beautiful medium to work in when you're going to shoot it and reproduce it because it has no sheen to it at all. It's really dead matte. So when you shoot it with a camera for reproduction, it picks up no reflection. The color is beautiful and intense. So he goes into his pocket. He doesn't draw anything. He just takes out a little brush with 3 hairs on it and starts painting this blood right on the painting. I mean, just directly, right in front of us. Ta-da, 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 painting. I had to go look out the window. I really, it was a nerve-wracking experience. I came back, I put the little highlight on it. Then he throws a little shadow under it to give it some dimension. And I said, son of a bitch, this guy's great. So there you go.
Of all your stories, that's the craziest one. And I can't imagine. I mean, look at the dimension. Also, the KISS guys, they use one brush to initially do the outline, and he really got that. He got this reflected color. And he really was an old world master, correct?
Really, really amazing. Yeah. Italian guy, could speak 4 languages. Just a wonderful, wonderful man. I really like them.
We'll cover David Berg quickly, but he did this series of posters that were in the solo albums that we just saw. This is the final piece, and these were the sketches. Any quick thoughts on that one, Dennis?
Just that David complained that he didn't have enough time to do it, and he had to hire 3 or 4 assistants to help him with this job to get it done in time. For instance, all those stars were cut out, pieces of paper that he glued on, because he wasn't going to sit there and paint each one, and so that's the way that was done. So, David wasn't going to do that himself, so he had somebody sitting there cutting them out, and he really broke his ass on this, and I think he did a very fine job considering the time we gave him, except for Gene's face. is the only thing that I really don't like about this shop. She's face is just wrong, but the rest of it is good. I also, I didn't like the idea of doing this type of art inside those solo albums, which has that beautiful old world painting portraits of each guy. That just doesn't go, Seems like it should have been for a different project, but yeah, there it is.
Yeah, it's history. And as a kid, this is the stuff I would obsess about, and I would think about the difference between the look of the cover and the look of the posters. To me, I mean, I don't think anyone could argue the covers are timeless. They're high level, realistic paintings, and these to me look so of their era. That is a very 70s illustration style, and I like them too.
Right. Well, David Byrne was a wonderful artist, and he was very 70s. Most of his work. If you look at his website, you'll see. A lot of the stuff he did for the Broadway theater and stuff, very 70s vibe. This is the guy who did the work for the Unmasked cover.
Here's Unmasked.
And that's Victor Staben was his name. He's a fine artist now. He has a museum someplace of his artwork. Very, very serious guy.
Right. That's one of the panels. So the cover was done in a comic book style. This is 1980. So this was a poster within the album.
That's right.
And the one thing I wanted to talk about, so these actually were the three panels were very large. These are pictures from an auction of the panels. So they're when I say panels, I meant the rows of panels. So each row is done separately, but we noticed that the text is left off. So can you explain, Dennis, why that would be done last?
I can only guess at this point because I don't remember why. I didn't give that as an instruction to Victor. So Victor took that upon himself to leave those blank, and then he did lettering on or just some vellum, and then we had the printer combine it. It's a good idea because if in the future you wanted to change the story and put different words in there, it would be an easy task. Also, the lettering would be sharp and crisp and clear and just shot as black, let's say, and not as 4-color process.
That's what I thought the reason was. Also, maybe for translations, right, to other countries, other languages.
Well, how about that?
I taught Dennis something. All right.
That's right.
And this was the original concept for Unmasked that Dennis's assistant, Vinny, created, which was very different.
Right, but it was the beginning of the process, and some of it you can see is still kind of there, where they take their masks off and what have you.
And you said you didn't use, this was kind of a separate thing, but you said you didn't use ruby lithograph. Could you give a quick explanation of what that was?
Ruby lith was a transparent red film that was used for blocking out areas on artwork, black and white artwork usually, or indicating areas of art that had to print in a certain color. So instead of drawing it, if it was a large area, instead of drawing it in ink and filling it in, you could, and if it had sharp delineated edges that you could cut, you would use an X-Acto knife and cut out the ruby lith on an overlay, usually an acetate overlay. And that would be for the printer. He could just shoot that as is. And you get nice, sharp, obviously, edges and corners. And I don't know what else. You probably have more to add to that than I do, Steve.
Well, I just remember doing like 2-color jobs in college where it was black and an overlay, and to define the overlay, you just kind of
okay, so that's it. Yeah, that's it.
So we talked about working with art and artists. Talk a little bit about photography. We're going to also really talk about touching up images or modifying them after they came out. So this was the gatefold for Kiss Alive 2 from 1978, and one of those 4 flames I hear was not really as high as the others, and it was airbrushed, correct, Dennis?
Right, not airbrushed, but added via retouching. This was their stage show. It was a phenomenal stage show. I mean, this is when it was reaching its heights. It was really getting big. The drums went up on an elevated, I guess they used a forklift or something back there, but it went way up in the air. It was like the finale, and then all of these bombs went off, smoke, fire, plumes of fire. Me and Barry Levine stood. This is during a sound check. This is not during a real show, so that we can control things. And we wanted to do it over and over again. Also, we stood about, back in the audience, in the center of the rows of chairs. And it was just like, okay, you ready? Everybody ready? 1, 2, 3. And then the pyro guys would blow everything off at once and Barry would shoot it. And then we'd wait and they'd load it all up again and then we'd do it again. And we did a bunch of shots like that. And it's amazing how many of them are real duds. I mean, sometimes the thing didn't go off. Sometimes it went halfway up. You could never get one where it really looked like this. But we took one of the better ones, and I took one of these plumes of fire, like, let's say, the extreme one on the left or right, whatever, from one photograph, and we just inserted via retouching, by photo manipulation, into the other photograph. Probably some other stuff too, a little fire, a little smoke. So it wasn't really airbrush. It was more like combining pieces of photos, together.
I didn't understand that. Well, actually, let's jump forward, talking about combining pieces of photos. Can you talk about how the Dynasty album cover was put together?
Well, you would think that this would be an easy shoot, wouldn't you? Guys, put your heads together. No, look at the camera. No, okay, everybody ready? Paul didn't like his hair. And the one that looked the best, the one that I was going to use. So can you take my head and hair, or my face is good, but part of my hair is not good. So we take a section of his hair and we put it in. And so this is made from, I think, 2 guys are from one photo. And then the other 2 guys are from 2 separate photos. So there's like 3 photos that went together to make this.
Physically cutting a print?
So it was done photo manipulation. They would block out areas and print in that area from another source. And of course, you would still get funny edges that had to be taken care of, but it wasn't that bad because they really initially did a very good job. And the hair, very easy to, fudge together, and you would never know where one began, the other ended.
Right. And when it's printed, who would be looking for that? And here's another piece we saw earlier. We saw the preliminary shot, or we saw the final shot, we saw an outtake. But so the Kiss was shot in straitjackets, but the final poster was decided to not show them in straitjackets. I guess it was too extreme. So this was airbrushed.
Yeah. We loved their pose on some of the straitjacket shots, but we didn't want to use the straitjackets. So we had the straitjacket just turned into black. I think that's my favorite poster ever.
The composition's really nice.
I just love it, and I like what I do with the logo. I like it.
Did you compose their positions?
A little bit me, a little bit Scavullo, I can't say it was me totally, no, but I would say things like, look at the camera. We're getting ready. But Gene looked that way.
And Gene didn't stick his tongue out during this era. It's well known that he got braces, early brace wearer. So he would have this separate way of smiling.
Right. And I told him not to stick his tongue out a lot of times. I said, we got enough of that.
Did he receive that request? Or
yeah, no, I said to him, you got your makeup on, you look scary, enough. And he said, I forget.
He said, Dennis, that's great feedback.
Basically, yeah, he said, I forget.
This I only recently heard this in Claudio's video, that this isn't even a table, it's just a piece of wood. But can we talk a little, like, you had to source this for the inside of Music from the Elder, which was Kiss's medieval concept album. Dennis, you had to acquire the chairs and set up this whole scene?
Yeah, when I figured, the front cover is a door, so I figured, okay, it's a gatefold. So like when you open up the album, what do you see? Oh, you see what's on the other side of the door. So I said, what would that be? I said, well, it's probably the sort of the meeting room where these sorcerers and the Elder figure out how to, deal with the world. So I said, okay, so what would that look like? So I said, I need some fancy chairs that look like they're from medieval, maybe, and so on and so forth. So I had a shop. This is New York. It's not California. If it was Hollywood, I would have no trouble. They got a lot of prop houses out there. They got everything you want. Not here. But I knew one place called Newell Art Gallery, 53rd Street, I think. And I knew they had stuff, a lot of stuff. So I went down there and I saw these chairs, and I said, I want to rent 6 chairs. So I rented them. That was these. The chair in the back, furthest back, came from some other source. I don't remember where, but that would be the head guy. He would sit there, right? I needed a table and didn't have a table, but I think David Spindell, the photographer, said he had a chunk of wood that looked really good. That could be a table. I said, all right. I looked at it. I said, you got it. So we just put it up on some sawhorses, you know. And then I wanted a candlestick, and I had to find that and still yet another source. But I liked it when I saw it, so I rented the candlestick. And then we got the fat candle, stuck it on the candlestick, lit it. Believe it or not, even in a still, quiet room of his studio, that flame flickered and flickered and flickered. And naturally, I wanted it to be very symmetrical with the chair in the back. But so that we had to retouch. We had to put that flame dead center and straight up and down. That was really it. That's the only retouching on this.
Got it. And we'll move over to Creatures of the Night. We talked about this much earlier. This was the set that was built, and there's an inset of the album cover there. And then we can go to the album cover. And Dennis actually sent me over this comp. So can you talk about the process of working with the photos and retouching the eyes with the glow?
For the comp, you know, to show to the band and everybody, I took photostats. We described that process before. I took photostats of different shots of the guys' faces, cut them up, stuck them together, and sent it out for a one piece. I don't know why this looks like it's not one piece, but anyway, maybe I did a couple of these. And then I sprayed them blue. We had a product called Spray Mark. It's a magic marker in a spray can. So I sprayed their faces blue. I knew that whatever was black on the photostat would just stay black because it was a transparent kind of like I say, like a marker pigment. And then I had an airbrush in the art department. I masked out everything but their eyes, and I sprayed the eyes, and I purposely let it leak beyond the outline of the eye so it would look glowy, trying to figure out what the final would look like. So then we did the final, and the way we got them blue, we just put blue gels over the lights. So when the lights shone on them, it was a blue cast, and it really worked out very well. Bernard Vidal, the photographer, did a great job with that. And he then they went out, we got a dye transfer made, which is a very fancy color print. And I had those retouchers, highly skilled guys, highly skilled. They work on dye transfer, which is a much different process than working on a ordinary color print. Ordinary color print and retouching would be done with airbrush. Dye transfer, they use bleach and dye, and they go back and forth, back and forth. But the retouching is invisible because there's no paint. It just looks like it's part of the original photo. So dye transfer, they still use dye transfer for some things, I think, out there in the world.
I found this person who still operates a dye transfer machine.
Right. It's made out of 3 different films, 3 different colors. Much like your television, it looks like it's full color, but it's really only 3 colors on your TV. It's RGB, basically, yeah, instead of CMYK. And dye transfer is the highest quality color print you can get. They're very expensive.
Are these dye transfer pieces here that we're seeing? And I can see there's a cut.
Yeah,
here.
But it's not a physical cut. It's one piece, and then the retouching got rid of that.
All right, one more piece that I think we're going to jump over to Q&A. I asked Dennis about this one. So when Eric Carr joined the band in 1980, replacing the original drummer Peter Criss, Eric initially had this pretty dense makeup design and complex because it had 2 outlines, essentially. It had the silver outline, a thinner black outline. And after the band performed one show, it was decided, from what I've heard, it was decided that it didn't read well from a distance. Makes sense. Everybody else's separate eyepieces. And it was decided that Eric would change his makeup to what we saw right here in the Creatures album cover and have that split, no outline. And yet the photos for the cover of the tour book were already taken, which we saw in the very beginning. We can see Dennis here, and Eric has the more complex makeup. But in the final shot in the tour book, Eric's makeup was retouched. And Dennis didn't remember this. But you say you would have been the one to do this you probably did it, correct?
He might have changed his makeup between the afternoon sound check and the show.
Oh, okay.
That just occurred to me.
All right, so maybe you didn't.
But that's not beyond reason. I mean, they were always tinkering, you know?
Maybe it was a change. Okay.
Yeah, it's possible.
We may never know.
Never know.
And all right, I guess we could cover this one, then we're going to jump to Q&A. This is a cool one. I think it aged really well. It's very there was an aqua tinting, which is when you add color to black and white photos. It seemed like there was a mini trend in the 80s, even in music videos at times. Can you talk a little bit about both the front cover and the back cover for Kiss Asylum? And obviously this is after Kiss took their makeup off in 1983.
Yeah, Paul said there was an album cover by a band called the Motels, and he kind of liked it. And it had, I guess, high contrast photo with paint smeared on it or painted on it. That was about all he gave me. And I never saw I don't think I saw the album cover. Yes, I did. I saw it. But I didn't want to do it too much like theirs, so just copying the whole thing. So, I mean, I did a high contrast photo, but the way I did the paint was nothing like theirs. And then the back cover just followed suit. Paul helped me paint this, by the way.
Paul, now an artist, a fine artist.
Yeah, I know.
And this is Dennis's actual handwriting up top, which I didn't realize until recently as well.
Yeah, that's right. Had the hand done look, the hand painting. And so I did the handwriting.
Yeah. I mean, I hope what we're learning through all this is like how much of the concept comes through, and Dennis had a hand in the entire process. I'm going to stop sharing here, and I think we can go to Q&A. Wow. All right. It's been a while, guys. Thanks for hanging out. It's kind of a marathon session. There's a lot to talk about. A few people have left, and they left comments. So if anyone wants to ask a question directly to Dennis, please raise your hand. I'm going to read some of the comments, and some have been actually messaged to us in advance from people who couldn't make it. Let's see, Dennis. We had Dan, who was here earlier, and he asked how Kiss was as a client. Were they hands-on and demanding, or free range and trusting? And did they give contradictory and messy committee type of feedback?
Okay, pretty easy to answer, I guess. In the early days, when I first started through the album covers, nobody gave me any input or criticism or almost anything. I mean, a little bit. But the band had nothing to say about Alive. They had nothing to say about Destroyer. Everybody loved it. The more famous they got, the more input they wanted to have. It's funny, isn't it? But it wasn't bad. But but it changed. Basically, the only guy who ever had anything to say about anything was Paul. Gene didn't care that much, but he cared a little bit. The other two guys, Peter Criss and Ace Frehley, never showed up at any of these meetings. They were out of the picture when it came to album covers or stuff like that. They just didn't care.
And eventually they were out of the band.
Yeah, well,
And in the comments, Dennis, if you're not reading them, we have people saying, Martina says all the time, being asked to make the logo bigger. Jeremy says way too many times. And Greg, welcome, Greg, says drinking game, take a shot every time you've heard make the logo bigger. Yeah,
yeah, right.
Somebody sent in a question. Did you feel that you always had to top the previous project?
Yeah, in a way. Well, not top it, but I felt I gave myself a high mark to try to hit every time. So I'll tell you, it became stressful. Toward the end, I did 15 or 16 albums for them, all in a row. Nobody came in between the stuff I did. It was just me, 15, 16 times. But toward the end, the band had a lot of ups and downs. They were failing. They were succeeding. Bill Aucoin was having personal problems, their manager. They fired him at one point. My boss became their manager. The personality, everything changed. The vibe in the office was different at times. So when they were on top of the world, when Kiss ruled the world, as they said, the pressure was great because what I was doing would be seen by the world. They were just biggest band in the world. And naturally, I felt that pressure. But then there was some time way later in their career when I was still doing them, their 14th and 15th album, it was different. I didn't feel that pressure anymore. I kind of, knew what I was doing, let's put it that way, and I just did it. And every album is not an iconic album cover. Some of them kind of like, they're okay, but they're not great. At least according to me, they're just not great. The fact that you like that Asylum cover, Steve, is interesting because a lot of people think that sucks.
Really?
and they don't like Animalize. And some people like Animalize. Animalize came at a very down period in the band's career. It also came at a very down period in my life. I just didn't practically give a shit about anything back then. I mean, it was hard. It was hard going to work. Like I say, things changed over the years. So, the analogy I always make is Babe Ruth was the greatest baseball player ever. He's still got records in the record books. He really does. And but he struck out a lot. And he hit a lot of home runs, but he struck out a lot. And so in the 15 or 16 I did, there's a handful that are, even a couple that are iconic, and some are very good, and some that are like, oh man, I wish I didn't do that one. What can I say?
Yeah, and for anyone who's not in the KISS world, which is most of you, Dennis, these things are discussed every day on Reddit, on Facebook groups. There's rankings of KISS albums, and Dennis could be exposed to every critique. Literally, 50 years after these albums are released, 45 to 50 years, you can go out there. They're talking about it today, and they don't know you're in the room most of the time, so they're going to say whatever they want.
That's true, and sometimes I chime in, but most of the time I stay out of it. But whatever. I understand. I probably feel the same way half the time. I've never been on Reddit. Should I go on Reddit?
Yeah. I don't know that you see anything too different. It's more anonymous than Facebook, so people are more willing to say,
"Oh, I see."
Whatever. There's good parts of Reddit. This group kind of originated from Reddit, so there's.
I'm on Facebook. They got so many KISS groups. It's unbelievable.
Yep. Somebody asked what it was like for you, how you felt when digital tools were first introduced, and how you adapted to them.
I cried. I didn't become an artist to type things on a keyboard and push a mouse around and try to draw with it's like somebody said, it's like trying to draw with a shoe. That's before they had all the stuff they have now, But it was hard. It was like, I got poor marks in math, and to me, working on a computer digitally is like math. At least it was originally when I first saw it. I was just working with my hands, razor blades and glue and ink and paint and artist. I was an artist. I got high marks in art and low marks in math. I'm a smart guy. I have a high IQ and all that shit, but math always eluded me, and I hate it. And I thought the digital thing, I had it in the same bag as math, And I had to make a decision, and it was a hard decision. Do I continue being a graphic designer here or an art director? Or do I find another career? And I had no idea what I would do. I couldn't even find anything that was vaguely related, that was sort of creative, but, art. I'm not going to become a painter. I'll starve to death. And so I decided to try. And a neighbor of mine who was into everything new, he bought a Mac. It was the first Mac. Remember it? It was this big and this high. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Mac computer. And it had a screen that big.
Yeah.
And he went on vacation or something, and he brought the thing over, and he plugged it in, and he said, "Here, play with it." He said, "Yeah, play with it. Here's what you do. He said, "Don't worry, you can't break anything," and he left. I doodled around with it to try to break the barrier of the mystery of this new world. I didn't get very far because I didn't know what I was doing. But finally, when I decided that I better try harder, I bought a Mac. And I paid half of it with cash and half of it with a credit card. I went into debt. And I taught myself how to use it. And I started to do everything with Illustrator. I didn't, and Quark Express, do you remember Quark?
Yeah.
So I used Quark, and I didn't use Quark. I used Illustrator. I was doing mechanicals in Illustrator because I felt comfortable with that program. But then eventually I learned Quark and Photoshop and the rest of it. And then, of course, the Adobe suite came out with the InDesign, and I hated InDesign when it first came out. I thought Quark had many features that were better. Still do, actually, in some cases. But I learned, and so now I do it,
For anyone who hasn't used, the first versions of these programs were very primitive.
Yes. I was going to open I live on the 6th floor of an apartment building in New York, and I was going to open the window, unplug my Mac, hug it in my arms, and jump out the window. That's what I was going to do.
Glad you didn't do that.
Oh, with tears in my eyes. I can't do that. I can't do this. But I broke through, the invisible barrier of the difficulty of learning this, and I did it.
There's always something new coming along for us.
Man, oh man. Well, now AI, and I don't know, forget it, man. Amazing.
Yep.
Amazing.
Somebody else asked, what advice would you give younger designers about handling big personalities or high-profile clients?
Well, being a designer or art director, if you have to present, and if you're a freelancer, of course, you're presenting all the time. But thank God, if you work for a big agency or some big design studio, you don't have to present. You just hand it over to your higher up, and they go and do that dirty work. But if you're designing it for yourself, I used to think this is a general thing. It's dealing with high-profile clients, or just they're all high-profile. I mean, some of these people run big businesses. They're heavy-duty people. They have personalities that go with that. Sometimes they can be tough. The first thing I learned was that your wonderful talent and design work will not speak for itself. You can't just lay it down and go, there it is. Fantastic, isn't it? You can't. Because they don't know what the hell they're looking at sometimes. They're not, they don't have an astute aesthetic sense whatsoever. Some do. People are people. There's all different kinds of people. So you really do have to sell your work, and you have to become good at talking. And I went to art school, and I went to another art school, and I was in the business, and I didn't know you had to be good at putting your work over verbally, but you really do. You really do. So you have to learn how to be a diplomat. You have to learn, maybe just by talking to these people, if you learn who they are a little bit, their personality, kind of what they're going to be put off by, and what they're going to respond in a positive nature to. And if you can do, you just got to be smart, and you got to be sensitive. It just doesn't, I know students that I graduated with. I went to Pratt Institute. A lot of talented people went there, because you got to be talented just to get into the damn place. And I had classmates that I thought were not very talented, not too good. And some were geniuses, it's like, and a couple of those people at least two that I remember, went out and got high paying, really good jobs. One was the art director of a big deal magazine, and I don't remember her being a good artist or a good designer at all. I know the other guy was so average, he was below average. But he could probably talk. He could talk his way into it. And then I did this typeface because that reason and this and that, and people fall for it. You say, oh, I see. Well, the work you did for me is really good stuff, which they wouldn't come to that conclusion on their own. So, You got to be a diplomat. You got to be smart. You got to read their mind a little bit, and you just do your best. And if you still get shot down, you get shot down. Nothing you can do about it.
You get better at it over time too, I would say.
And you do get better at it. It takes you need some confidence. Don't worry. I mean, don't worry about it. It's not the end of the world. I know you need the work. I know you need the money. I know you got to get paid. Believe me. But you do your best. You support your work verbally. Tell them why you did some things and why you didn't. Some people don't want to hear that. They don't care. Some people. It just depends on the person. Really.
Yep. And speaking of your time at school, someone asked what you learned in school, whether it's a class, a technique, a tool, did you find most important in your early career?
Now, I went to Pratt Institute. It was a highly, highly, highly regarded school. It's hard to get in. You went to Pratt. Yeah. Well, they did not. They dropped the ball, I believe, in a lot of cases in different classes where they didn't teach us how to do it. Technique, approach, physical, how you do it. The what's what of everything, the nuts and bolts. They wanted to concentrate more on concept. You're going to be a genius here, and you've got to come out with great ideas. Well, that's true, and they could have intermingled that a little better, but they didn't. So when I came out, I felt like I was really lacking in the hands-on stuff, the skills. And back then, you had to have hands-on skills. When they hired you out of school, you were not going to be an art director. Art director was an elevated position in any place. You were going to be in what they called the bullpen, which is you sat there with a bunch of other guys with glue and razor blades. I mean, it was murder, man. And you had to know how to do that. And if you couldn't do that craft, is really what it was, you wouldn't get a job. You were worthless. What do you mean you don't know how to do a paste up and make things square and size things, and you don't know how to spec type? I had to learn that on the job when I got out of Pratt, how to spec type and all that stuff. And that was all a basic part of what I was going to do for a living, and yet they didn't teach it. And I was lucky enough to get a job where they had a little patience with me, and I was smart enough to pick it up quickly enough so I could get a job and hold a job.
It sounds like obviously understanding the concept aspect helped you and was critical.
Yeah, I don't know, but a lot of that comes with innate ability too. You can't teach.
That's true.
You can't teach somebody how to be smart, or you can't teach somebody how to be creative. You just can't. And that's what concept is. Now you can help them along. Oh, break it down. What is the client trying to sell? Who is his competition? I'm talking from an advertising standpoint now, not graphic design. But when you're being an art director, you got to think conceptually. So the other guy sells this, but it's cheap, but it's not that good. But our stuff is higher priced, but it's real quality. Oh, how do I sell that idea conceptually? And there's I guess there are ways, so you think of it that way. But so advertising and graphic design, it kind of two different animals. Art director and designer, they overlap certainly, but they are a little different.
What advice would you give to a young designer coming out of school today?
Don't do it. Well, first of all, I realize that today I think I'm right. You can shoot me down or back me up, but I think being a freelance designer now is really a hard road to hoe. If you get a good staff job, take it. A high-paying job, maybe you can move up. And I mean, there are some art director jobs if you work for a large corporation or something. They pay great, and you can still do nice work that you're proud of and be fulfilled more or less creatively. You're not always going to be fulfilled. You're going to do stuff that you wish you didn't have to do. But you know what? I mean, hey, it comes with the territory, and I wouldn't sweat it. I would just do your best. I took bad ideas that came my way from my superiors, and I had to do them because I couldn't talk them out of it. And so my task was, well, take this bad idea and just make it look great somehow. And, it can be done. So a new person coming into the field now, it's just rough because you have to, if you're going to freelance, you have to generate a new client almost every job that you do. And that's damn impossible, man. Because a lot of them are one-off. They come in, they need something, they need a logo, but that's the last time you're ever going to see them. They got your logo and then, they're gone. And any little job they do, a brochure or something like that, the secretary does it on Word. It's so disheartening. However, they don't know any better and they don't care, and it serves their purpose. Take the corporate job if you can get a good one. If you're going to work by yourself, well, good luck. I don't know. I suppose there are some superstar designers out there that get work on a regular basis. I don't know. I don't even know who's the best designers these days. I mean, do you have a handful of names that you could come up with, Steve, to say these are the top guys in the country right now?
Yeah, there are a handful of people, and I would say it feels like just a handful of those who are well known that many designers would know. Aaron, I can always send you a list, but Aaron Draplin is a big one. I think you'd like his work. He's got a real 70s style, real chunky line style. So there are people out there. They tend to have their own style that they apply to everything.
Do you think he's making a good living?
Well, he did a video about how he approaches the logo design that went viral, and after that video came out about 10 years ago, he started to go from, I think, doing a more boutique kind of level of work to doing national and international clients. So yeah, I do. And he's also written books now on design. So, but you can imagine that's a pretty tiny percentage of people who get to be at that level, and a unique set of circumstances that brought him there. I'm going to find some designers and send them to you. Then you'll find a few I think that you'll enjoy.
All right. Yeah. I mean, it seems dry, real dry. And if there's, a lot of rules in there, I don't know.
No. I'm taking that as a challenge.
There are some rules. There's some rules. I just say, well, if you're doing something, you're struggling with it, and if it doesn't look good, young designers, put it in reverse and then duplicate it a lot of times. You can't miss.
I gotcha. Greg, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I would say as far as some of the younger designers out here who are really doing their thing, and I think also there's a lot of overlap with Dennis's work with brands and freelance and stuff. Jesse Nyberg, who has his own YouTube channel, he does almost exclusively freelance work and works with some high profile clients, but he also does a lot of album cover artwork. So I would say and he also has a very analog kind of style. So I'd say if you were to check out his work, Dennis, I think you'd find some things that you do like about.
Oh, thank you. What's his name again?
Jesse Nyberg.
Yeah, I want to look up hot designers now just to see what's going on. I talked to Michael. Michael Dorette is a hero designer to me. And if you look at his website, it's gorgeous. And he's got a real niche style, I think. All I'm getting at is you can be great, but I don't know. When you're a freelancer, you're constantly having to generate new clients, and that's hard.
That's a challenge. We're going to come up with some solutions here. You're getting a lot of thank yous. A lot of people had to leave. This is a marathon session, close to 3 hours, but you got a lot of compliments along the way, Dennis, and thanking you for your insights and helpful information. So I could read those to you later. But thank you so much for your time. This was great. We got it on record. We're going to get it up on YouTube in the next few weeks. And thank you, everybody who attended. I know it's very thorough process, but hopefully you learned. I'm sure you learned a lot of stuff about how things were done.
Honestly, we just scratched the surface, honestly.
Yeah. Martina says you're a legend.
Thanks, Martina. I think you're a legend, too.
And Kenya says, thank you for walking us through the analog process and your memories. So, yeah. Martina says, haha, you're welcome. Greg says, thank you as well. I don't know if you're reading the chat.
Yeah, thanks to all of you young designers out there. Thank you for hanging in with me. Thank you. Hung in as long as you could. I peed in my pants twice so far, and
Dennis does not hold back. All right, yeah. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. We're going to end it.
I'm from Newark. What do you want?